November the 12th, 2024. And I want to just go over the IPS points of interest for this evening's discussions. And if you want to talk about anything besides this, just comment below. I reset my computer because last week we were beset by gremlins. So any minute now you should see everything be back to normal, and hopefully there will be no glitchiness. So tomorrow, the 13th, we will have the House Oversight Committee is giving a UFO hearing. We're going to learn something about UFOs. That's Representative Tim Burchett. Musk's Starlink satellites fall to Earth. I think there were 36 reports, people reporting. They were seeing these Starlink satellites falling to Earth. And many Harris supporters believe that Musk helped Trump rig the election, and they're just burning up the evidence because they used Starlink. Putin proclaims death to the New World Order. So look forward to the new World Order. There are calls for Biden to step down. And if he does, if they want to give Kamala Harris a little bit of time as the first female president, it will take the 47 away from Trump. And that would be a major disaster. Worse than taking the name Trump off one of his towers, because it would destroy all of his merchandise simultaneously. Predictive programming is predictable. We'll talk about that. I have an article out, Assume Nothing, making the case for the nobody died claim. There's still some people who aren't comfortable saying nobody died, even when they know that something has all the hallmarks of being a hoax. I called this the bloody guardrail, and upon closer inspection, the blood is all theatrical, fake. It's corn syrup. We'll talk about that. Biologics on UFOs. Again, that's being pushed quite heavily right now. Starving astronauts. Sunita Williams, a.k.a. Medusa, is starving to death on the ISS. Tomorrow, InfoWars goes to auction. And you may remember Nick Fuentes. I was talking about Nick Fuentes and his statements about owning women's bodies and how it was going to be taken out of context. Rather, I mean, the context is what it is. It's just a troll. By all definition, we're talking about somebody who is likely espousing views he couldn't possibly hold seriously. And in context, it's just bad comedy. He's a shock jock. He has no power to introduce any of these things. This guy was anti-Trump until last week. He's a January 6er. But that comment has now been taken to mean that this is what Trumpers believe. And following this, his address was released on Twitter. In other words, Nick Fuentes has been doxxed. And along with being doxxed, he is being harassed, and people are showing up at his house, and they're videotaping, they're recording his house. Someone rang his doorbell. He came outside and maced this person. I believe she's a 57-year-old, 5'1" grandma. She rolled down the stairs. He took her phone, ran back inside, and closed the door. Now, ironically, he's hiding in his mother's house. And so he can't really be against women that much. But, as I said, this is just internet talk. But out of context, it has triggered a lot of people. And he did, in fact, spray a stalker, which is going to raise some interesting questions because she says that she's going to be pressing charges. Namely, the question of, is it self-defense if you open the door and immediately attack? The judge might ask, well, if you felt so threatened, why did you open the door? Why didn't you call 911? I mean, there are many, many problems with his approach, and we'll probably see what happens next. I mean, I'm sure his handlers will protect him, but not a very good look. Not a good look for some kind of a male supremacist to be attacking a grandma and then running back inside. Kind of weak. So we'll talk about that as well. So these are the IPR points of interest. You can follow this at the Insider website, where we will be selling the upcoming tabloid. And it is coming. I have secured resources to make it happen. It will happen this month. We will kick this thing off, and it will be lit in 2025. But for the rest of the year, we are going to have issues. And what we're starting here is a tabloid to distribute the ideas from the off-world stage perspective, quote, globally, in the real world. So when we often talk about this, the trouble of trying to convey these outside-the-box ideas to people inside the box, how futile it is, how even if somebody knows the truth about one particular incident, they're not in the right context to make sense of it. The truth doesn't matter when you're submerged in the sea of irrelevance. But if you want to bridge, if you want to have a conversation with somebody and reach some kind of middle ground or conclusion, this will be invaluable, and it will be distributed online and through our IPR press pass carriers. And speaking of press passes, and I know some of you are still awaiting yours, they're undergoing a redesign, and I will be sourcing them locally and buying those in bulk. So everything is coming together, not as quickly as I would have liked, but that's just how things are with small business. And, content aside, ultimately this is essentially a small business operation. All right, we are joined by Diana South, Let's Go, Frank Murr, Deprogram Truther, the Frugal Snowbird, Demetra 101, Roxy W. Diana South says, one very young coworker believes her uncle died at 9/11. I still believe nobody died. Yeah, we'll talk about that because the assumption should be zero until proven otherwise. Anytime somebody says they believe somebody died, you should ask the name. They tend to forget the names of their loved ones when they die in psyops. Or they're lying. I mean, you tell me. Joined by Ears Up, Lean Dion, Michelle Kastner, Ollie Goering says, get revenge, Grandmama. Yeah, we'll see. From what I read, and we'll go through some of the accounts, the police and the EMTs, I think they kind of took the side of Nick Fuentes because obviously this person was not only provoking, and she says there's not a sign that says no soliciting, but she explicitly and clearly went there to harass after he had already been targeted for harassment, and many people were calling for someone to go to his house. So I don't see it working in her favor. She can't claim a victim. He was certainly doing something questionable by attacking somebody on his front yard. Joined by Armin Ree, AJ206, and Skyfish. Awesome. Thank you for joining, everyone. Dwayne Aubith got my shirt the other day. Oh, that was you. Okay. It's automated. I have this. If you go to ips.monster. So in addition to selling merch on Amazon, I have an Amazon merch account. I have a Printful. Printful is a very good company. They print on demand all sorts of products. And I listed a lot of the auto hoax items as hoodies, both zippered, unzippered, mugs, t-shirts. And I also put some of these AI-generated penguin cyborgs on shirts. And so if you order from there, it's all automated. I just get the emails that say something's been ordered, it's been sent. So it's a great process. So thank you for supporting the store. And I do want to put more emphasis on merch, on promotion. And I'm actually ordering, I've created a series of postcards, as well as business cards and posters. But anyway, a link is right there. You can find it at ips.monster, and I'll be adding more designs as we go. One of the main designs is one that I ripped from Mick Media when they did a hit piece on me and psychoanalyzed me. They said I was anti-authoritarian. My feelings were so hurt. It says, auto hoaxer, auto believer. They were setting me up. It was an interview, and they were hoping to get me to say some crazy stuff about domed flat earth and fake volcanoes, but the conversation went into epistemology and how we perceive and consume media, and the broad categorization into the auto believers and the auto hoaxers. Skeptics and non-skeptics, active and passive consumers of media. And along with their presentation, they actually created this graphic which has auto hoaxer in the all-seeing eye, then it has the auto believer inside of a TV set. And this is the fundamental distinction. This is the off-world stage perspective in a graphic. And I thought, well, that's nice. So we lifted it, and it has been consistently selling ever since. So shout out to Mick Media. All right, we are joined by Ted Striker 112, Rocky Road, Salty Siren, Dynamo Hum, all have received the Blue Wrench, and Sync Lloyd. Conscious Reality CD received a Blue Wrench. And those are all courtesy of who purchased the wrenches? Ted Striker, thank you very much again. So all of you who are getting these Blue Wrenches, you're going to be getting the first access to the IPS shorts, which I'm now uploading. So if you missed that, Substack does this fantastic thing. I love Substack. This is what I moved to after WordPress. When I upload my archives, it parses it through AI into clips with suggested titles and transcripts. So what I've been doing is I'm taking these clips and I'm uploading them independently, and I'm exporting them to TikTok. And IPS shorts are on YouTube as shorts. So for example, I had a short conversation about about 35 seconds talking about the Atlantic and instances of predictive programming for the Trump head wound and how they just gave us another example. But this was part of a longer live stream, but I was able to just clip this segment and release it independently. Let me go ahead and just play this clip in case you missed it. Again, from the Atlantic. If you remember, the Atlantic had, with specificity, demonstrated that the ear would be shot. So this is a new one. Trump won. Now what? The United States is about to become a different type of country. Now take a look here on the side of his head. What is the first thing you think? Because this is just propaganda imagery. What do you think? What does this call to mind when you look at the side of Trump's head? Now, it just looks like a grisly head wound, and I point out the other one, the ear, etc. But every night after I'm through uploading the nightly archives, I will be taking these clips and uploading them separately. And this is how I think we can grow the channel, is we can reach out on TikTok and other platforms by taking shorter segments out of a long form podcast format. And not everyone has 3 hours to sit down and listen to something they've never heard before. But if they hear a clip, they might sit down and listen to the entire thing. All right, let's go ahead and continue. We have quite a lot to go over. And this is probably fake news. Breaking: FEMA is deploying 350 trucks across 6 Michigan counties. A member of the United States military has corroborated maps posted online with their timeline. This is verified. The situation got darker. So this is basically 2020 all over again, but it's coming from the left. They think there's going to be a recount. There's a lot of people claiming that Trump had stolen the election. So we'll get into that. And we will also get into let's get into the UFO stuff first. I think that's kind of important, because this is tomorrow. So on the 13th of November, 2024, we're going to learn something about UFOs, says Representative Tim Burchett. And I listened to this, and it sounds like it's mostly a nothing burger. It sounds like they're not going to really tell us anything we haven't already heard. But he says here, regarding Trump, he's been pressured to release the JFK files. And in President Trump's mind,
will customize my car insurance.
in his mind, this is the discussion about the UFO files. He somehow connects it with the JFK thing. So they're going to release these at the same time. I'm not sure what the JFK thing is, other than from what I've heard, some people are going to probably make it seem like Israel did it or something. But they're not going to say JFK didn't die and Stanley Kubrick directed the PSYOP. They're not going to tell the truth.
The upcoming new hearings is UFO expert and retired UK Ministry of Defense employee Nick Pope. Nick, it's always good to see you. Thanks for joining us again.
Thank you for having me on.
So, Nick, last summer's hearing, incredibly captivating for many of us.
Hopefully it's better than the paper mache aliens they gave us in Mexico.
From reverse engineering programs to recovery of biological material, all of these allegations and claims. What are you tracking? What do you think we can expect this time?
Well, I don't think it's going to be what the UFO community refer to as disclosure.
Okay, it's not going to be disclosure, so you can get your hopes back down. Ryla05 says, where are the experts, the holistic experts, talking about how a bullet would have ripped Trump's ear apart? Yeah, exactly. Where are the experts? Where are the skeptics? There aren't any. And that's something I want to bring up as well, about the ear thing. Because we know it's fake. And there are some who think that the fireman's dead, but the ear thing was fake. And these are not compatible theories whatsoever. So I'm going through in order. The next thing was biologics on UFOs. And I think that was something said by Matt Pizzagates, who orders his underage girlfriends on Venmo, which is all a matter of public record. He didn't know that Venmo posts your purchases on a timeline for your friends to read, which is really bizarre. I never quite understood that. But he didn't know he had a public feed and people were monitoring his purchases, and he bought something that he shouldn't have. But I have a link here where he's talking about, quote, biologics, which is a newfangled way of saying EBEs, extra biological entities, aliens. It sounds better than interdimensionals or demons. Like Tucker Carlson was attacked by a demon in his sleep, and it scratched him. It actually scarred him, if you believe him. Does anybody here believe that Tucker Carlson was scarred in his sleep by an alien? Okay, let's see. Lean Dion says Trump will release the MSM Plus files, JFK, Epstein, 9/11. Yeah, if he releases anything, it's only going to be information that doesn't contradict the essential storyline as told. It's real. It's real, but somebody else did it. They're never going to call it what it is, which is, a big fat hoax. And really quick, let me play this clip. There's this suggestion here of Biden stepping down.
He is looking for. That is my question. I'll start with you.
Joe Biden's been a phenomenal president. He's lived up to so many of the promises he's made. There's one promise left that he could fulfill, being a transitional figure. He could resign the presidency in the next 30 days, make Kamala Harris the president of the United States.
Whoa.
It would absolve her from being able to from having to oversee the January 6th transition, right, of her own defeat. And it would make sure that it would dominate the news at a point where Democrats have to learn drama.
Okay, so as a PR move, they think Biden should step down, let Kamala be the first female president, and then she won't have to be humiliated as VP, who is the one who hands over the keys to power to Trump. So I kind of see where he's getting at here. Spare her the humiliation, but also as a PR move. And it wouldn't surprise me. If you look at what was it Gerald Ford said in the is that who it was who said that there was going to be this female president entering in when the previous one dies in office. So there's still time. And I'm just saying, if it happens, it's going to ruin all of Trump's merchandise. All those MAGA rappers with 47 tattooed on their neck no longer belongs to Trump. All right, let's continue here. Jay Nelson says, Tucker was ravaged by Azazel, fallen seraphim. Come on, Tim. Right. Angels, demons, same thing. He was being... And Alex Jones also talked about poltergeist activity after this. It just says something about their cynical manipulation of their gullible followers, how they don't care how silly they sound, because they know that enough people will buy into it just out of sheer, I guess, cognitive bias. They want to believe it. I mean, I've been pointing out for almost a year now that the standard talking point on the right has been aliens are demons. And then in the next breath, they say illegal aliens are bad. So they're always conflating extraterrestrials with aliens from other countries. And I think it's just part of this general xenophobia psyop that targets the right, fear of the outsider. And it all correlates to even anti-vax, honestly. It's all about the borders, national borders, the sky, the border, the edge of the planet, and where outsiders come in, the skin, which must be intact, cannot be penetrated by a government injected, we'll just say the injectable Eucharist. Because that's what it is. Government is savior. Saved versus the unsaved. Poncho Lefty says they're filling in the Art Bell void. Right. And I'm not against paranormal. However, the paranormal discourse a lot of it, with UFO stuff, is obviously government propaganda. UFOs, aliens, these are just angels with science fiction veneers in order to get the atheists on board with a religious mindset. That's why I'm not so much into it. But I am fascinated by the paranormal, the occult, anything that is kind of outside that people have somehow glimpsed. I don't want to rule it out prematurely. Ryler05 says it would be hilarious if they stepped down to screw with Trump's 47 hat, but Trump 48 would be more significant. You know, it would be. With the whole head wound theme, the 4884, very consistent. And I can just, list all the season finales of TV shows that foreshadowed the Trump head wound. The Boys, Season 4, Episode 8, Assassination Run. Stranger Things, 4-8, Matthew Modine character, he gets shot, Trump stand-in. But the Assassination Run from The Boys, they actually changed the title because it so closely approximated what happened with Trump. But again, Season 4, Episode 8, very consistent. Again, 4884 has been a repeated theme. Like 84 days after Butler, he goes back again. You had the 4-8 earthquake. We have so many examples, this 4884 thing, but it's just like the 611. He was shot at 611, and we were pointing out the significance of that number before. And now they're leaning into that. And they're saying Trump was shot at 611 because God was sending a message that he was being protected by the armor of God, Ephesians 6:11. But I guess there's only one suit of the armor of God because the fireman didn't get his. But yes, my thinking has been, if Kamala gets in, by any means, it invalidates so much merchandise, it would be a disaster. I think it would be hilarious. Honestly, I think it would be a disaster. The tattoos, you could change a 7 into an 8. The merchandise, though, the web domains, all the MAGA raps. See, they have this cult of personality, but they take these numbers and they attach so much significance to it that, 45, 47. It would be great considering Trump's consistent insistence on branding. Everything's about branding, and you'll take a brand. He even has a bar called, I think it's called Trump 45 or Whiskey 45 in Trump Tower, where he has a shot glass that has a bullet from a 45 in the shot glass. You can actually buy this. And this was before he was shot. Before he was shot, he was selling a shot glass with a bullet in it. Does that make any sense? For a guy that doesn't drink, to have a signature shot glass with a bullet in it, no, it doesn't make sense. Unless you have our understanding, our perspective. Salty Siren says a swastika is 4/7 configuration. Yeah, I believe I've seen that. That is an actual thing. The ADL has a website. They have all these, like 47, AOK symbol. Apparently the neo-Nazis took this from the Satanists. It used to mean 666. Now it means white power. Like they're constantly labeling signs and symbols and numbers as having some hidden significance. It's hard to keep track. Lucid Stream says, at the end of the day, we have no idea what the real meaning and origin of these reoccurring numbers are. I would disagree. The source for a lot of these numbers, and a lot of the meaning you can discern from usage. But for example, let's take 33. What's the significance of 33? And it is consistently associated with the themes of ascension, this Christ idea, the fire snake, the kundalini, the idea of the dying, resurrecting Savior is consistently one of these themes that has that number attached to it. And then you have the Masonic death resurrection ritual with all of its symbolism and its numerology, which is also consistently used throughout all these various fake events. So if we look at the symbolism and the source, it seems to stem from what we would generally call the New Age, the occult, or the esoteric aspects of mainstream religions. So for example, the obelisk, I often talk about the symbol of the earth god, has been reiterated in the form of the rocket. And if you look at the names of these various rockets, they have the names of these different sun gods, and there's special significance to all of it. There's a reason why the Starship has 33 Raptor engines. and Mach 33 is the supposed speed at which one has to take to exit this material realm. It's the escape velocity. The number 42 is consistently associated with Kronos, Saturn, themes of time control, and that's what we're looking at, time control, through control of history. And they control history because they control the present via fake news. But the number 42 has been overtly attached to the SpaceX program, thanks to Musk. And it's all from his usage of it. It comes from Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, where the number 42 is an answer given by the supercomputer at the center of the universe, and it's the number that explains the meaning of everything. What does that refer to? Probably the ASCII, is that the code? Where the number 42 in some computer code is the same as the symbol or the asterisk. So ASCII code 42 is the asterisk symbol, which means the wild card for everything. But the number 42 is also apparent in other areas not related to SpaceX. Jeff Bezos has a $42 million clock. So you got the clock, which is Kronos. It's a 10,000 year clock, which I believe is associated with the 10,000 day return of Saturn. But Saturn and Kronos both refer to this time-space control, which they exert through control over all media. The number 42 also, and I have many, many examples to support this, but the 4 is a cross, the 4 seasons, and it has the cross in it. And the 4 and the 2 combined give you the symbol of Saturn, the astrological symbol. And you'll see it used as such quite often. But I don't say I know for sure what these mean based on some book that I found somewhere, but rather by usage. And the usage is very consistent. In fact, I have a whole set of mind maps. Let me pull up my mind maps. It's mindemup.com. Great website. And I've been working on these ever since I started really noticing these correlations between the year 1968 and 2020, as though we were repeating a lot of events, a lot of themes. And that's exactly what was going on. In other words, major narratives were being recycled. And a lot of times with specificity, like Trump is all saying, when the looting starts, the shooting starts. You know, that statement was just borrowed out of like 1967, 1968 segregationists. But the more I looked at it, then I was like, wait, if there's a pattern here, if 68 and the zeitgeist at that time is repeating in 2020, and it's part of this design, then are we going to see 69 reflected in 2021? And wouldn't you know, on the anniversary of Apollo 11, Jeff Bezos launches, we had a number of connections, 1969, 2021. But specifically, the Apollo landings had this like anniversary date launch, which was very conspicuous and not coincidental. But as we go on, we're like, wait, it continues. And it continues until we're looking at, it just seems like this time period has a lot of things that call back to the early 70s, late 60s, like Roe v. Wade leak 50 years later, like almost to the date. And then Trump's Mar-a-Lago raid was, I think, to the date, 50 years from when Nixon resigned. So yeah, so this is not a case of anything more than repetition, like deliberate repetition, almost like a form of, I call it recycling. They recycle everything. So it was August 8th, Nixon announced his resignation, and then on that same date, Mar-a-Lago was raided. Now, was it 50 years since, or it was the same date regardless? But when I saw this, my only explanation could be, we have to be living through a manufactured history. That this is indication that there is a meta script, that is a script that guides everything else, like the umbrella script, and everything else falls beneath it. And they tell stories in broad strokes with big significant events, and then everything else just falls in line beneath it, or it gets censored. Other sources of information and explanations for what we're seeing comes from research into various areas. I wasn't even looking too closely at this stuff until I started looking closer at the symbolism and iconography around NASA. Like I say, NASA is an Egyptian mystery school. That space travel is allegory for ascension into states of higher consciousness. But that ultimately space is a metaphor for the mind and mind control, worldview control. It's never been about taking you to some distant paradise. It's just another false heaven, another ideal. But it's the consistency that reveals here that we're looking at a very specific set of symbols and stories and motifs that are repeatedly used. And 9/11 is a classic example of this. Every aspect of 9/11. You're looking at things like Flight 77 flies for 77 minutes, hits the Pentagon, which is 77 feet high. Building 7 burns for 7 hours, falls in 7 seconds. Every number, every flight, the times that they fall, hit at 8:46 a.m. Look, 8:46 a.m., what's the significance there? What ties into the timing of Mercury rising? But that number was extremely prevalent all throughout 2020. George Floyd kneeled on for 8:46. The sun set that day, 8:46. So the level of planning here is an indication of how the script works on multiple levels, but that it's ultimately coordinated with the stars. It has this astrological basis, which makes sense if you look at media as just having supplanted religion, and all religions are coordinated with the celestial. What's up? Joined by Buzz Dean, says listening at work. Okay, let's see. I'm catching up on comments here. Lots of great content. Ted Stryker says Tool has an album called 10,000 Days, released in 2006. Yeah, 10,000 Days, the Saturn return. And it just means that Saturn returns to the place where it was when you were born. America just had its Pluto return in 2022 on 2/22. Joined by X322. Thank you for joining. Armin Reese says, make NASA great. Yeah, NASA is an Egyptian mystery school. Even Space Force, you look at the symbolism, you got like this pharaoh. And the capsule of the rocket, which is often featured in their PR with their astronauts, especially with Apollo, that represents the capstone, the golden tip of the obelisk, the pharaohic elite. Bezos' rocket, its capstone, has a blue feather, blue origin, and I think it's just a reference to royalty, the blue blood, the rulers. But the ancient symbolism has been given modern interpretations. Poncho Lefty says, why would they give clues? Who does it benefit? Now, that's what's fascinating about this. There's the exoteric and the esoteric, and this is the part that makes some truthers think that they're trying to tell you. And I think the meaning of it is that there's a initiated interpretation, and only the initiates can make sense of it. But why put it in front of us? Why not just keep it all clandestine and hidden? Why drop hints? Like, why are they putting exit signs in the Matrix? That's a very good question. I've thought about this for some time. Why would they put stuff out in the open? And one reason could be to maintain a knowledge disparity, and sort of like a limited hangout operation, for example. A limited hangout operation is when there's a secret they know is going to leak, like the moon landing's fake. So they leak some information about it, and they find out anybody who's looking too closely, and they make sure they don't get the big picture. So they control the drip, and they contaminate it, and now they know who has that information. So it could be, in part, about knowledge control and maintaining a monopoly on worldview. But another part of it, and this is the esoteric aspect, is that if they are indeed involving us in some kind of massive occult group ritual, then our knowledge of the symbols nor our lack of consent are a factor here. If we don't know what they mean, it doesn't matter. If we're somehow empowering some kind of, and I say ritual or ceremony, I mean, that's ultimately what we're, I think, kind of confronting here, is where this new priesthood is still employing the same operating system as before. Are we in fact matrix batteries? Are we a part of something that is not just psychologically spellbinding? Is it merely philosophical? Is it just a problem to think your way out of? Is it merely lies and perception distortion through propaganda? Or is there an element here where it involves some kind of spiritual confusion or intentional blinding? I've been thinking about this. If we're just a bunch of over-evolved apes with huge egos trying to cope with the meaninglessness of everything, and we're making up stories to feel better about it, if nothing means anything, that's one thing. But if you believe that and it's not true, it could be very limiting. It could be a form of gatekeeping. So I'm open to a number of possibilities, but you can't ignore the occult undertones to the propaganda engine. There's multiple levels to it. But I don't jump to any conclusions that involve, who done it. I'm not trying to say I know who runs the world. I don't think it works that way. I think the most important thing is to figure out what it is first and not fall for red herrings. And what we're looking at is rather fascinating. Lucid Stream says, we live in a predetermined mathematical looping construct. That was David Icke's idea in Tales from the Time Loop, which is an interesting book. And I wish he would go back to reptilians, but the way he used it in his more metaphysical speculation, because he was censored because they said this is just blood libel, replacing some ethnic group with reptilians. But that is what he did. He plagiarized quite a bit, but he did engage in some fascinating metaphysical speculation. The idea that the reptilian symbolizes our animal and lower natures, as opposed to our spiritual origin, and that as long as we're dominated by the reptilian, we're not going to figure our way out of the time loop, which is what he called this thing. And it's a very interesting model. And I'm interested in models of reality. I don't care about the shape of the world. There's a trip to Antarctica a bunch of flat earthers are taking in December so they can witness a 24-hour sun. And does that automatically mean we're on a spinning ball? Probably. It depends. What's your explanation? I'd be interested to hear how people can work out an explanation for that. But it doesn't change the fact that what we have been shown is a misrepresentation. We've been shown bad CGI and cartoons, so what are they covering up? And I've always said that the question of worldview is far more important. I'm more interested in how we arrive at our conclusions. Okay, let's see here. Salty Siren says, I know someone whose son works for Elon. I'll try to get her to call in sometime. Elon's been called out for his fake robots, where he's got these robots that are just, I think they're just people in costumes. He has some that appear to walk autonomously, and they talk to people at parties, but the truth of it is, there's a phone operator. There's basically somebody in the background talking through the robot. And he's been called out on that fakery. And yet nobody calls him out on the space fakery. Isn't that interesting how that's kind of protected? And about 3 days ago, we were talking about how the alien invasion thing isn't really going to happen. It's all just a way of, through myth, preparing us for the dissolution of national boundaries, that the grays represent the synthesis of the black and the white, the polarities. In other words, they're going to destroy nationalism, one world order, one nation. That's all likely going to happen with no visitors, no paper mache aliens from Mars. No other species is going to come down and fix us. However, the idea of stuff falling from the sky has been an ongoing theme. Even Wernher von Braun said asteroids at some point would be used before the alien invasion. But I'm thinking, and this is what we said the other night, that maybe it might be something else. Like just as Musk has his mind junk polluting the internet and fomenting war, division and hate and all this stuff, they're going to say his space junk is screwing up the commons up above. So you got cyberspace, low Earth orbit. These are both commons, global commons. And one man is set to destroy both. And this is going to make the case for, okay, we got to do something more to regulate free speech. And to prevent rich people from having too much access or having too much input. And it also will raise the question, well, what is Musk doing in space? Well, he's using his Starlink satellites to spread misinformation and to rig elections. So I could see it, and this is what we said the other night, as a scenario where Musk's satellites are falling or getting shot down, or the Kessler syndrome, where they start hitting each other and exploding, and you have satellites just like an avalanche above, they all just start falling or hitting each other. But whatever the case, it would lock us down for a long time, perhaps. But just as we start talking about this a couple days ago, all these stories are suddenly popping up where Elon Musk's satellites are falling from the sky with dozens of witnesses all over the place. And I don't think it's a coincidence. So this is from the Daily Star. Elon Musk's Starlink satellite falls to Earth. It's nerve-wracking for Americans. A fireball lit up over 4 U.S. states. This is on Sunday, 10 p.m. Central Time. Texas, Colorado, Oklahoma. But this is a new story, and it comports with what we've been kind of suggesting here, that Musk is going to be perceived as a threat to cyberspace and therefore our minds and low Earth orbit. And these are both commons, but that's the main thing, the whole concept of we must protect our shared spaces collectively. This is the basis for climate change regulation. You know, America is ruining the world for everybody else, and it disproportionately affects poorer countries. Salty says they want to believe Elon's the new Santa. Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, what a deceiver. But in my view, he's just a historic personage. He's an actor portraying a role. And you can't say these individuals aren't necessarily entertaining. I understand the charisma and star power and how that influences people. But when you break it down, he's an amalgamation of Wernher von Braun, Jack Parsons, Gene Wilder, Tony Stark, and maybe a few other sources, but for the most, Constantine, I would say. But we've actually found various aspects of what we call Musk. Musk is a construct. Diana South says, IPS space junk helmets, press pass. Yeah, that's actually a smart idea. Put the press pass on the side of it. If you're not wearing a space junk helmet, what are you, a flat earther? Like, what is their argument for not wearing a space junk helmet? What is the argument for the chemtrail believer not wearing a mask? People need to live up to what they profess to believe. We got to make them walk the walk. And space junk is real, according to a lot of people. In my view, it's a hyperstition. Paradox Penguin just started watching The Penguin. Oh, it's great. I finished it last night. I will not give you any spoilers. It's one of the best series I've seen in a long time. Great depiction of a real villain. And villain in every sense. Very dark character. Unlike other villains who are often just victims. Like, I felt like Joker came off as kind of a victim. Speaking of Arthur Fleck, Joker, I think it was Leo Pirate made the connection between Arthur Fleck, America First, and Nick Fuentes, and how Joker 2 may have forecast Nick Fuentes having some kind of a violent meltdown and all of his groypers going to war. And he may be onto something with that based on what has just recently happened. So just to catch you up on this, if you have not been keeping up, Nick Fuentes was mocking women after the results of the election, and he said, your body's my choice. Something like that. And this caused a lot of people to dox him, and he was getting a ton of online hate. He tried to blur out his picture on Google, and people started showing up at his house and recording outside of his house. Well, he had enough of it when some woman named Marla Rose walked up to his front door and rang the doorbell. Now he has 3 doorbells. She rang the top one, I think. I don't know what he would have done if she had rang the second or the third one. But as soon as she rang the doorbell, and this is kind of questionable, he came out with mace and he sprayed her in the face. And then he knocked her down the stairs, or she fell down the stairs. And after that, he took her phone. So here it is. She says, I shot a short video less than 2 minutes from the public property of the sidewalk. As I did so, a woman pulled up in her car, rolled down the window, and said, is this where the douchebag lives? And I said, I think so. And we laughed about his incel ass. Then she was like, you should ring his doorbell and see what he has to say for himself. She said, I cannot back down from anything that smacks of a dare, so I figured why not? There was not a no solicitor sign, so I rang the doorbell. He swung the door open like he was at damn Waco and sprayed me with pepper spray and pushed me down the stairs onto the sidewalk. I rolled into a protective posture because I was anticipating kicks and stomps. He grabbed my phone, ran back inside. Friends, it's dark inside there. It was like a bunker. I have a video. I'm holding on to that for evidence. And there's more, but we have a picture of Nick Fuentes outside with the police. And I think I even have video of Nick Fuentes. Yeah, actually, one of them has been deleted. I'll find it here. We do have like a 30-second video where he is spraying this person. Again, I think she said she's going to press charges. And I think she might have a strong case. Yeah, this video has been deleted. Interesting. All right, well, you can probably find it quite easily. It's going to be making its rounds, but here's a snapshot. I was actually doing a watercolor of this earlier today. So he opens the door and he sprays. Now, is this staged and fake? I don't think so. I don't think so necessarily. I mean, it could be. How hard would it be to stage something like this? Nick Fuentes distracting the masses with inconsequential and excessively boring stuff. I don't think so, because these individuals are highly placed propagandists. He was Ye's campaign manager. He had dinner with Donald Trump. There's a reason why he's put out there. And I don't look at these as distractions. I look at these as puzzle pieces to analyze, to look at closely, as individuals to follow, because these are the promulgators of the narratives and messages that are shaping the worldviews of the various fringes, the sides of the political horseshoe. So I pay close attention to what far lefty bloggers and podcasters are saying, and on the right. And I don't think that ignoring or treating these as distractions is the way to go. I think we have to analyze the programming as it's being disseminated. That's why when, I guess it was the strangling death of Jordan Neely, when that happened, and you had the Daniel Penny, I was noticing automatically that this actually fit in with this ongoing narrative that the right wing had been promulgating, where they had been saying, get out of the cities, get out of the subways. But get out was like a motto. They just kept saying, get out, get out. And I'm like, what does that mean? It's like quarantine yourself, get out of the cities. And when this event happened, Synchro Morpheus had noted in many ways that the Jordan Neely death scene at the hands of Daniel Penny had many tie-ins to a movie called Get Out by Jordan Peele. And the movie Get Out has a character who resembles Daniel Penny. They're both lacrosse players, but it goes into depth. And then you find out that the director, Jordan Peele, was inspired to make the movie Nope off of the George Floyd event to which this event was compared. So I pay very close attention to very specific individuals. And Nick Fuentes is definitely a world stage character at this moment. And there's a reason why they're given undue attention, like Laura Loomer. Like, these are obviously clowns. Fuentes is an insurrectionist, or he was on the steps calling for it, and he wasn't caught, wasn't arrested. That's kind of fishy. Okay, let us continue. Yeah, I agree. Lucid Stream says, only for people living in the metaverse. Nobody around me cares about that story. The thing is, it would be easy to turn off the TV and just tune out. It would be simple. I mean, I lived that way most of my life, where I could literally just immerse myself in books and watercolor paintings and put my head in the sand, and that's fine. It wouldn't bother me because I know how this stuff works. However, I'm involved in a long-term plan here, and my objective is to become the most informed, non-believer and skeptic that I can be. And I'd rather be informed than underinformed, because if I'm underinformed, then I will have no clue about the intricacies of what's happening when something big happens. And then I'll be at square one trying to figure things out. So I really maintain that the best position is to be the informed or enlightened non-believer. And that means we have to know more about what the believers believe, even though we know it's fake and staged. We have to know more than the believers know, because they are generally low information, very low information. So I find all of it extremely relevant. I am 100% about being the most informed media critic. And I think that's important because we're studying, it's not about this individual. It's not about this individual in suburban Chicago saying mean things about women. It's about the programmers and the scripts and how they sell the scripts to various demographics. So I'm looking at this from an anthropological perspective. I'm an alien anthropologist. I have no attachment to it. I'm not in the info war. I'm a conscientious objector to the whole process. But from my perspective, I can look at key figures, what they're disseminating, and I can tell, hey, you could treat this out. And you can show who is plugged in to the same provocateur, to the same federal agents trying to get people to push certain ideas out there. We've watched how Discord and Telegram have been effectively demonized. In fact, they said that Discord was the site where someone was selling government secrets. This was just the other day. But I consider myself deprogrammed. I could literally turn off everything and it wouldn't affect me. Like, I'm never going to wake up one day and suddenly believe the next psyop because I just tuned out. And if knowing more about the world stage than the people who believe they're on it isn't in your purview, I'd recommend tuning out. If I wasn't doing this, I'd be back to what I was doing before. Before I even looked at the news, I didn't even look at the news closely until about 2014, 2015. Before that, I was immersed in books and selling art and working, and I had a nice place, and everything was kind of quiescent. However, I was more or less led to this, I think, and I'm immensely entertained by it. And it's brought a lot of answers because I've always been into movies. My last major, I was film studies, and that's where I got into Kubrick. And so the more I studied film, and the more I look at the subtext in films, the more I started to see this other influence connecting everything. And at the time, I was falling into the synchromistic explanation. I thought, okay, there's got to be some higher power at work. These are synchronistic occurrences, and I'm somehow privy to it. But then the more I studied the Normiville news, the alternative news, and I started to see the predictive programming relationship between news, I dispensed with that explanation. And I realized, okay, no, this is all part of a monolithic media presence, and that it's the new monotheism. This is ultimately mind control. So let me get into assume nothing. Oh, and by the way, InfoWars is going to be auctioned off tomorrow. I'll post a link when I find it. So this is Assume Nothing, examining the bloody guardrails. When an event reported on the news is observed to have the hallmarks of a mass casualty simulation or a drill, the skeptic must assume nobody died. Why? Because nobody dies in drills. The mass media presents us with simulations to the unsuspecting public because it functions as an extension of government and it's delivering its propaganda. But if there is even the smallest indication that any event is staged, then there's no reason to assume any part of it is real. We must assume 0 deaths in all such cases, unless evidence is presented. And when I say hallmarks of a hoax, I don't mean just laughing crisis actors. I mean predictive programming. Concurrent programming. I mean things like before Astroworld, where Travis Scott auto-tuned like 9 people to death, he was in a music video called Escape, and it's only for 1 frame, but in that music video he's wearing a Pearl Jam shirt that advertises the Rock Slide Festival that had 50,000 people, just like Astroworld had 50,000 people, and both events had 9 people die in a crushing. And the shirt he was wearing had these portal-looking designs, similar to what he had on his set. Now, that was a video that was released and filmed before the crushing deaths. So that right there is just in itself an indication of hoaxery. But if there's any kind of scripting or narrative that's suggestive that you're looking at a simulation, you have to start with zero. Some people are stuck on the quote, "some people died," or "I wasn't there, so I can't say nobody died." And these arguments sustain the false flag narratives, when it's better to just call a hoax a hoax. Just call it a hoax. Because false flag refers to real attacks with real casualties, and the assumption of real death hides the fakery. Now, some people say that, quote, "some people must have died on 9/11, such as jumpers," even though the same people will say there weren't any planes. So if you're saying there were no planes, then you are subtracting a substantial number of people from the asserted death toll. But for some reason, you can't justify going all the way down to zero. And I ask, why not? If it's a drill, it's a drill. So here's a few points to consider if you're still stuck behind the bloody guardrail, which is the assumptions of real death. And I've checked, the blood on the guardrail is all fake. So one, all participants in the simulated events are presumably bound by non-disclosure agreements. These NDAs are not valid if crimes or illegal activity occurs. This explains why those laughing crisis actors never blow the whistle on who killed their classmates. They know it's fake, and they're not being asked to cover up murder. Also, there would not be duper's delight on their faces if real atrocities were happening. They would look shocked. They wouldn't be laughing. Two, President Trump's ear. We can all accept his ear wound was fake. So we don't need to assume the fireman died. Why would you assume that? The mistaken belief that he was killed prevents people from seeing that the assassination attempt was a propaganda event, not a false flag, that nobody died, not even the shooter. It was a propaganda event, but that it necessarily would have been orchestrated by the government above the level of party politics. This was an engineered historical event. 7/13 was an engineered historical event. Your grandchildren will read about it in history books, that this president got shot at and it clipped his ear. But it's at a level that transcends the political back and forth. That's why the Democrats aren't going to expose the hoax. And the assumption of a death prevents people from calling the whole thing fake. The events of 9/11, it should be noted, for those who are still stuck on some people died on 9/11, dozens of drills were being conducted that day. Mass casualty drills are closed movie sets. So think about how much control this gives directors to ensure that the whole area was a closed set. There's no reason to assume that the towers were attacked or that the demolition was somehow sloppy and people died. Anybody asserting that somebody must have died is grasping at straws and operating on a false premise. Nobody dies in drills. And the psyops on TV are not attacks. We have to call things by their right names. The beginning of wisdom is to call things by their right names. It's not an attack. It's not a false flag. It's a simulation. It's a psyop. The "I wasn't there, so I can't say nobody died," that's not a good argument. We have more than enough information to call a hoax. And we know that mass casualty simulations are always concurrent with these fake shooting events. Every time there's a big bombing or big shooting, you find that, oh, they were in a drill. Like next door, there was a drill for the same thing. Well, what does that suggest? So we've already ruled out false flags, so you don't have to assume anything in a death toll. The burden of proof is on the media to provide evidence so you can know the truth. If you believe it because you can't debunk it, then you accept a burden of proof that is not yours. So for example, if you see a magician perform a series of 10 magic tricks, but you can only figure out how he did 9, do you then assume the 10th trick was magic? If you can't debunk a magic trick, is your default explanation, "Oh, I witnessed magic"? Of course not. You can say, "I know it's fake, but I don't know the specifics of how this particular illusion was created." That's what you can say. The burden of proof isn't yours. And finally, psyops imitate art. The IPS think tank examines media fakery and properly contextualizes it within the worldview created by mass media. We consistently observe the relationships between fake news and predictive and concurrent programming. This relationship is an entrainment between entertainment and news. It's deliberately engineered to help the public accept a particular version of history as they create it day by day. So we can assume nothing. Major historic events must be assumed staged and faked until proven otherwise. And if we're wrong, let us know. When you find evidence that something really happened as reported, let us know. Okay, let's see here. Catching up on your comments. Mango Penguin says, guardrails were mentioned in the SNL opening skit. Yeah, it's become a very popular phrase. The term guardrails, like I used to search it, and you would find literal guardrails for like roads. And I appropriated that term to explain narratives that take someone calling out something as fake or who sees something anomalous and fishy about a news report, and instead of arriving at the conclusion that it's staged, the guardrail is like a red herring, and it steers them back into the big box. And after we coined this term guardrails, we have a book called Guardrails, how conspiracy theorists and such are, how free thinkers are, I think I put corralled by rabbit trails, because it's all about rabbit trails. Like, for example, people who see something wrong with the Trump event will say it was an inside job or there was a second shooter. Those are guardrail explanations, and they're allowed. You're allowed to have these other explanations as long as they don't let you go looking at this thing from an off-world stage perspective. Paradox Penguin says, Tim made a great point the other day, stating that serial killers have been phased out in favor of mass shooters. Yeah, for the fragmented media of the day, where everyone consumes it at their own pace, and we're not super synchronized as we once were, and they're competing for our attention, and they're overloading us. This is like brute force mind hacking. I don't think they could get the public to pay attention to a protracted narrative of a serial killer creeping around over the course of several months. It wouldn't work. So what they do is they give you the entire story in one day, and they just make it as shocking as they can. Our attention span won't support it, and plus we get a lot more in total. And I don't think necessarily that attention spans are shorter, but there's more competition for your attention, what they call the attention economy. And I say this because people binge watch on everything. People will sit down for hours and hours and hours watching, so they have attention spans. But there's a great deal of competition. Joined by P Trippa 103, Observing Reality. Thanks for joining. J5 says, I don't say anyone... Oh, I see. Yeah, I've always said that the burden of proof isn't ours, and if someone is really dead, the burden of proof is met like that. If it's real, it's not hard to prove. And there are many things that indicate something's real. Like there was a shooting last week, I think it was in Florida, a street party, and nothing about it looked fake. It didn't have any agenda attached to it. Like I should put out a list of what I consider to be hallmarks of a hoax. Predominantly predictive programming is a major one, but other things would be the immediately attached political agenda, press conference with the mayor, and T-shirts with the hashtag already printed. We have looked into shooting events like Thousand Oaks, for example, where the next day an NBA team is wearing a Thousand Oaks strong T-shirt with the 13 names of the victims. I'm like, there's no way that the next of kin could have been notified, that the names would have been released, that you would have made the T-shirts and then sent them to Los Angeles for these basketball players that quickly. And then you had celebrities like Lady Gaga was saying, well, the guy was a veteran, we need to look into mental health. So all of a sudden, this event is a major news story when the blood's not even dry yet, or it wouldn't have been if it were real. So it had all the hallmarks of being a hoax. The celebrity stuff, the agendas, the t-shirts, the slogans. You know, there's one guy who makes all the crosses for all the schools where they do the fake shootings. He's done it since Littleton. And I've seen him on Facebook, actually. And I think if you were to go to like your children's school and look in the shed, if they're going to do a psyop there, you'll probably find a bunch of crosses with a bunch of names on them already pre-made. Because they schedule these things in advance. I mean, they may as well. Observing reality, are you clipping with an app? Oh, I'm clipping with Twitch. So if you go to Twitch and you find anything you want clipped, I can export it to TikTok. And then this feature with Substack is whenever I upload the video, Substack breaks it up into clips that I just easily download. So I'm going to be doing TikTok and YouTube Shorts every single day. I'll be adding some content. Okay, moving on. So much to cover here. So Musk's Starlink's falling to the earth. It's nerve-wracking. The American Meteor Society received 36 reports. We were talking about that before it actually happened. Okay, now this is some interesting predictive programming. This is something from Synchro Morpheus and others. So Leo Pirate posted this. Former President Trump speaks at the Minnesota GOP Lincoln-Reagan dinner in St. Paul. Every single name on there. Lincoln, assassinated. Reagan, multiple assassination attempts. St. Paul, beheaded. Synchro Morpheus adds, there was a speech 3 weeks before the 7/13 head wound where Trump talked about having wounds all over his body. And I recall that conversation where he said he had wounds all over his body. And then he leaned, when he was mocking the podium problems, he leaned over, and as you can see in the picture, it looks like blood splattering off his head. Synchro said, Trump's comment about the podium leaning left could relate to Back and to the Left from the Zapruder film. Viral moment, Trump has problems at his podium. So it's a viral moment, which is why we're paying attention to it. It's these things that are projected onto the collective psyche that are noteworthy. Commenters reminded the former president that some of his predecessors, including Lincoln and Kennedy, sustained fatal wounds, while Trump has been accused of avoiding harm's way. Now, this is before, but he said that he has wounds. And I added this. Julius Caesar was stabbed 23 times by a group of senators on March 15th, 44 BC. And the Julius Caesar connection is that in 2016, 2017, was it Central Park, you had Julius Caesar performed, where Donald Trump was Julius Caesar getting stabbed and killed. And it was so disturbing a scene that Laura Loomer jumped on the stage and interrupted it. And 7/13 is Julius Caesar's birthday. And it's the birthday of Harrison Ford, who's in the new Captain America. And the trailer came out around 7/13, where he's president and he's getting shot at while he's at the podium in a theater, which kind of alludes to the Ford Theater and therefore Abraham Lincoln. Sad Sword says, you're a good philosopher. Check out Jason Giorgiani's take on Plato's Noble Lie. I think you would find it fascinating and good at thinking. Thanks for keeping it real. Thank you for the comment, and I'll look into it. Okay, see, this is something that we have kind of brushed upon. In Plato's The Republic, the noble lie is a myth or lie knowingly propagated by an elite to maintain social harmony. Yeah, I've been quoting Polybius, who said that it is superstition that maintains the integrity of the Roman state. So this is called instrumentum regni, instrument of monarchy. The concept is essentially that superstition maintains the cohesion of the Roman state. And this is from Polybius, and this is the rationale for the PSYOP entertainment complex, the rationale for mind war, which I say has supplanted religion. It says, this would not have been necessary had it been possible to form a state composed of wise men, but every multitude is fickle, full of lawless desire, unreasoned passion, and violent anger. The multitude must be held in check by invisible terrors and pageantry. The ancients did not act rashly by introducing among the people notions concerning gods and beliefs in the terrors of hell. So this concept is in play right now. They have all kinds of things that are God constructs. Like, for example, if you don't recycle, Gaia is going to flood the earth. If you believe everything you see on the news, you have weapons of mass destructions that are tantamount to God constructs. I would say that the mushroom cloud is like a war god. And when the people see it, they genuflect. They get on their knees and they pray in fear, essentially is what you're doing, to an emblem of state power, an image, a construct. And so we may not believe in gods in the traditional sense, but we have been given replacement gods and God constructs, all for the purpose of social control. I've been saying that COVID is like a devil that the atheists will believe in. Virus is a new iteration of sin, where you can weaponize real things through superstition and psyops and atrocity propaganda and use it for social control, maintain harmony. They want to disarm us, introduce the fear of mass shooters, for example. And where do they introduce these things? Mostly in the media, the entertainment media, primarily, the movies. They saturate us with this stuff. Like, look at the parallel, I think, proliferation of mass shooter games and mass shootings. So when the mass shootings start happening, you have these, basically like teenagers for the most part, with big guns and high body counts that are really impossible. I think a lot of these body counts, it just seems like you would have to be someone who's been saturated with a lot of first-person shooters to accept some of these unbelievable narratives. And I think it's by design. They want to make the mass shooter seem more plausible. So then they saturate the entertainment with mass shooters, not to mention the movies. And the movies, of course, feature gun. And by the way, I'm always disappointed, like when I see movies, action movies with gun battles. Like, I think I'm going back to like swords and axes and bows and arrows, because it seems like these guns never hit. Look at like John Wick in these movies, where they expend thousands of rounds from very expensive guns and they never hit. Like Tom Cruise or Keanu Reeves, they just run and the bullets never hit. I'm always disappointed. There's like zero accuracy in these things. So it's just not believable. It takes the believability out of it. I can't suspend my disbelief that much. So I'm going back to watching, Game of Thrones, not necessarily that one. Witcher is one. But swords, axes, far more believable. But even that, comic book violence is what informs people's perceptions. They exaggerate things on purpose. And part of it is intentional. It's intentional, I would say, is that they want to introduce into your realm of possibility things that do not exist. So when they fake it on the news, it seems more plausible. That's one of the main purposes of I think predictive programming is what you're looking at. It's actually foreshadowing, conditioning, and advertising. Okay, catching up on comments. Observing Reality says, any clips you decide to take out of your show, I'd post them from an account you own on every social media platform you can think of, instead of redirecting to a third-party site. Yeah, I'm totally open to that, actually. Okay, I will definitely make that a point. I think we need to. I think we need to get a lot of clips out there. Just for archive purposes. And there are certain things that I think we don't want to spend too much time reiterating stuff, but we could direct people. All right, let's go ahead and... speaking of serial killers, I'm always watching the #1 movie on Amazon because it always has some kind of relevance to the fake news of the day. And there's this one that just came out by the guy who directed The Village. And The Village has another one of these noble lie situations where the elders tell the children that this village is all there is. Everything else is wilderness. Anybody out there is wicked. And they're living in this like 18th century lifestyle, this commune. But it turns out they're in the 20th century. But the rationale for lying to them and keeping them in this little area was safety. The world was a dangerous place. They wanted to spare them from the horrors of modern society. So it was an agreed upon noble lie by the elders. The escapees were given a choice. You can stay here and maintain our order and lie with us and dress up in the monster costume and run psyops, or you can go to the modern world. That was the same director as this one I watched last night called The Trap, which is a serial killer movie. And I thought, why would they be putting out a serial killer movie? Maybe they might bring something back. It's been a while. Lucid Stream says, haven't seen yet, but I rewatched Joker. Interesting how when Flex stops taking his meds and steps into his darker Joker role, he's much more focused and sober, loses the tics and waywardness. See, that's a good point. The Joker character is, if you look at the first movie anyway, it's really this class warfare thing, where he's a victim of society, he fell through the cracks, mentally ill, kill the rich is a recurring theme. He becomes a hero, sort of an anti-hero, because he kills some rich guys on a subway. Again, the subway, which we alluded to with the Daniel Penny, Jordan Neely psyop. The subway is highly symbolic of the lower class going to rise up and threaten the upper class. That's why the right-wingers are saying, get out of the subways. It's all just metaphor. And the Batman movie starts in a subway, and he beats up a bunch of jokers. And then the Prophet of Doom, Frank James, who's sharing a cell with Richard Kelly, shot up a subway after complaining to the mayor that there was a lack of mental health services, which was the same complaint that the Riddler had in the movie. So the mental health theme is very consistent here, and I think it all ties in. Well, it has to. It all ties into this mind virus concept that those individuals who are mentally ill, who have bad mental immune systems, will catch mind viruses. Therefore, we must censor the internet for their benefit. So those of us who are asymptomatic mind virus super spreaders are actually a danger to society. Not that I'm going to do anything, or you, but somebody who's mentally ill, an Arthur Fleck, might be off his meds, hears what we say, and will do something crazy. Therefore, we need to be censored. That's the rationale they've been building, getting the public to acquiesce to. That's what Disease X is going to be. And they need the public to believe in mind viruses. And we're almost there. And Musk has been a huge part of this agenda. We need to believe in mind viruses so they can justify lockdowns. They've constructed the thought crime. It exists. There is a thing called a thought crime. This is like a dream, a totalitarian's dream. We actually have isolated the thought crime. And this is kind of a parallel to the isolation of a virus. And it is not insignificant that virus of the mind, which articulates all this stuff, the new science of memetics, that he was one of the first programmers of Microsoft Word and words, memes, mind virus. We're getting into the same area here where we're getting into the next phase. You see, it was 9/11. The government has to pat your clothes down to make sure you don't have a bomb on the plane. Then you have 2020. Now we need to know what's beneath your skin, what's in your blood, because, you might have something infectious. The next phase is we need to know what's on your mind. What kind of mind viruses do you carry? What's on your browser history? So there's an erosion of privacy that we've seen through these various psyops. So they've actually eliminated it. Meanwhile, we went from a society that seemed to generally agree that 1984 was a bad idea to one that now believes in completely eradicating privacy itself in favor of attention and clicks. And, obviously it's incentivized. Thank you very much for feeding the Krakwin thirst for truth. I guess I have to turn on the sound effect again. Yeah, Lean Dion says, Elon specifically talks about the woke mind virus. So the mind virus concept isn't specifically partisan, but Musk has brought it up to, as far as in his context, that it's the quote woke mind virus. And that it's going to destroy civilization. But the idea of the mind virus itself is a construct that we have been conditioned to believe in, and 2020 was there to condition us that the super spreader is the most dangerous person, the person with the strong immune system. It's paradoxical, but those of us who can talk about any ideas without going mad have strong mental immune systems. We have critical thinking. And critical thinking, your mental immune system, is something that they generally discourage. That's why I say the government has given the public mind aids. And that's what they want. They want a public that's totally susceptible to ideas with no filtration. So in a sense, there are mind viruses. But the woke mind virus is this body of ideas associated with leftism that are all seen as the bane of civilization to people on the right, like feminism. But when it comes down to it, they've just kind of appropriated that term without seeing how it applies to their own side. But the mind virus itself, though, assumes passivity, that we don't have agency and that we're not filtering our ideas, but that we catch them. And not only do we catch them, but we can spread them unknowingly, or that you can be passively converted. That's another part. Like, they want you to believe that you can turn on InfoWars for 5 minutes, and next thing you know, you're an insurrectionist. Or you listen to TikTok for 30 minutes, and now you're 17% anti-Semitic. Nikki Haley said that. And I disagree with this. I think we should reject the idea that we are passively susceptible to catching ideology. Because they want you to say, okay, we don't have a mental immune system, give us one. And this is also a parallel to 2020, where in order to be protected from the thing, the government needed to save us. So what is the equivalent? And I showed you the cover of Virus of the Mind by Richard Brody the other day, and it has a brain with a syringe going into it. We're going to experience, that's what Disease X is, the remediation of the outbreak of Disease X. What we are about to experience is likely going to be the mental equivalent of a mask. Also, the internet cyberspace equivalent of a lockdown and sanitation processes. So we'll see how it goes, but that is the next stage. And Musk is part of it. He's providing the rationale. He's a fall guy for free speech. Hark says, 1984 is so 1984, they're going for the Brave New World type system where peeps will beg to be slaves. Yeah, we're there. This is the Brave New World at this point, where we're so saturated with information, the sea of irrelevance. That's why I refer to the raft. Yes, it's a think tank, and we do have tanks ready to go across the world stage, but when penguins gather on the waters, it's called a raft. And we are a raft afloat the sea of irrelevance. And if you're not on the raft, you're submerged. That you might know some things that are true, but from your context, you can't put it into a place where it's even coherent, nor can you communicate it to anybody who is also submerged. There is no truth in Trutherville, nor in Normieville or Woketown. It's all a fictional universe, and it's a closed system. All right, moving on here. So yes, will Kamala ascend? Will Biden step down? And will Kamala take the number 47 from Trump and do all kinds of damage to his merchandise lines? I mean, it looks like it could really happen. And there's a lot of people calling for it to happen. I don't know. We'll see. Again, MK Truth Ultra, and this is probably fake, says FEMA is staging 350 semi-trucks full of equipment at a decommissioned Air Force base. It's like repackaged conspiracy theories about FEMA and Walmart. Like, so people are so afraid of FEMA. Do you remember FEMA coffins? I take credit for having debunked FEMA coffins. FEMA coffins are burial vaults, plain and simple. They've been misidentified. If Big Brother wants to kill us all, they're not going to give you a funeral. They're not going to dig you a grave. But they don't want to kill you all. They want to control you all, and they do. They're not going to take your guns. It's all a psyop. But even if they did, it doesn't matter because they've already taken your minds. Ryler05 says the Gerald Ford prophecy must be fulfilled. So where was that? Was that at the Herbert Hoover Library? So there was this is the one. It was 1989. So in 1989, Gerald Ford is in the Herbert Hoover Presidential Library, where he delivers a short speech about how he says that when we have our first female president, it will be because the male president steps down for some reason.
On October 18, 1989, in West Branch, Iowa, Gerald Ford, the 38th President of the United States, shared history with students from across Iowa.
Okay, so let me get to the part where he talks about this.
Young lady wanting to become President of the United States.
Well, I hope we do have a young lady at some point become President of the United States. I can tell you how I think it will happen, because it won't happen in the normal course of events. Either the Republican or Democrat political party will nominate a man for president and a woman for vice president. And the woman and man will win. So you'll end up with a president, a male, and a vice president, a female. And in that term of office of the president will die. And the woman will become president under the law.
Okay, so this is his prophecy. Now, this is in the Herbert Hoover Library. So Herbert Hoover died October 20th. He was born on August 10th. But he died on October 20th, 1964. So keep that date in mind, October 20th, 1964. Now, the first woman president, if this comes true, was born on his death day, October 20th, 1964. So just to reiterate, they're in the Herbert Hoover Library where Gerald Ford gives this prophecy. And Herbert Hoover's death date aligns with her birth date. Is she Herbert Hoover reincarnated? I don't know. But there does seem to be this indication or a intimation of a torch being passed. I think there might be something to it. Okay, moving on. Angst G says, is weed our current day soma? Interesting. Could be. Maybe it's media itself. You know, like, was it Oscar Wilde said religion? No, is it Karl Marx, religion's the opiate of the masses? I think media. It might be media. It's not even a chemical or a drug in the usual sense, but it's the hypermediation and what it's done to our minds. Like, we live in a very psychedelic age. I think we are collectively so immersed in various fictional universes, but it's a fascinating time to be alive. I couldn't be more entertained, and I couldn't be less worried about the future. And it's not because of apathy. Okay, I have a couple other notes on the person talking about. Let's go back to this really quick. This is another comment from the person who was maced by Nick Fuentes, where she says, the cop and the EMTs and my husband all asked me, why did you ring the doorbell? And I said there was not a no soliciting sign. I want to make it clear, I'm not whining about being pushed down the steps and pepper sprayed by a 26-year-old who broke my phone. I'm 57 and I'm 5'1", and he's having a melodramatic reaction. I'm a bit touchy, but then again, I'm not demeaning bodily autonomy. I don't know what he's done to others, but I was at the tipping point. Fuentes is on edge, but if you want to send him a care package, here's his address. I've forgiven my husband. Fuentes is a frightened little man. Don't ring the doorbell. He's on edge. Should I file a police report? Yes, I rang his doorbell, but does that merit assault and property damage? So that's a good question. Is she going to get into some kind of, I don't know, drama with Nick Fuentes? It's looking very fake, to be honest. It looks a little staged. But it's not outside of believability, but it's certainly fakeable. Would he stage a psyop? Would Nick Fuentes stage something like this? You know, I mean, these people aren't above fake swatting themselves. Okay, I saw this thing on an ad, and I guess it's meant for people who are perhaps elderly, but it's basically airbags that you wear. So if you fall, it literally opens up like an airbag. So this device is meant to keep elderly people from getting hurt when they fall. And if you look at the commercial, they wrap it around this big porcelain vase, and it falls, and this airbag opens up and protects it. I mean, it's rather incredible. But this got me thinking, is this what they had for Ashley Babbitt? If you remember, Ashley Babbitt was fake killed on January 6th. There's a jump cut. The whole thing was staged. It's been unveiled. Look at Woo's News. But there's a part where she falls on her back. And I thought, you know, that's pretty bold. I mean, even for a stuntman or something, they would have to have something to catch their fall. And I don't think it would work just to have like a pillow in the backpack. But she had an American flag on, so we don't know what was underneath. But could Ashley Babbitt have been wearing some kind of an airbag that was deployed as she jumped back and fell and hit the ground? And their squib was pathetic, by the way. There was like more blood on Trump's cheek from his fake ear wound, which was basically about one ketchup packet's worth, than there was on Ashley Babbitt, who was supposedly shot in the neck and died from it. Where is all the blood? Joined now by Jungle Jim. Thanks for joining. So an Ashley Babbitt airbag vest. That's what I think we're seeing here. Okay, and likely after tomorrow, we won't have to talk about Nick Fuentes anymore, for which I'm thankful. And I appreciate your patience in it. I have to look at all these unsavory characters because what we're watching is a movie, essentially. In the sense that, not that nothing's real, but that we live in a propagandized world where significant historic events are simulated all the time. And when I say significant historic events, I'm talking about the fake events that no matter how many of us call it fake, these events will be carved in stone. They will be in the history books, and they will be studied as though they happened literally. Okay, I have a short clip here regarding NASA. How did the mission go from 8 days to 8 months? There's an issue with one of the astronauts in space. I believe it's Medusa is starving. It says here, yeah, starving astronaut. "8 days to 8 months." And we're talking about the Calypso. And by the way, speaking of Calypso, again, this all ties into the Odyssey. Odysseus was stranded with Calypso. Space Odyssey. But they're still up there. I don't have the right article here. Let me put another search. Astronaut starving. Okay, here we go. Update on her health. Do they have enough food? There's been these alarming stories about this person starving. And maybe it's because the chubby guy that's with her gave away the game. He turned upside down and his cheeks just puffed up. He seemed to be struggling. Like he had this vein in his forehead that was just kind of bulging. And it looked pretty obvious to a lot of people that this guy was hanging upside down. And it wouldn't have happened if he was a little thinner, I'll say. And Sunita Williams is in no way going to give away the game when she turns upside down. My third eye says, is Fuentes a full-time troll? Yeah, the long and short of it is when the Trump campaign started back in 2015, you had the 4chan types, and they used the frog meme, Pepe the Frog, which got a lot of attention because Hillary Clinton had this speech about the deplorables, the racists, the xenophobes, the trans. She had this list of people that she called the deplorables, and she said, and they worship that racist frog, and somebody screams Pepe. Well, Nick Fuentes created America First, and they're associated with marching through Charleston, chanting, "You will not replace us." And he pushed the Great Replacement Theory. And then he gathered his little cult he calls the Groypers, and they gather around this frog meme. And this they idolize Trump. Off and on. They have a love-hate relationship with him. He doesn't go far enough, but whatever the point of the case is that he was the one who seemed to be targeting young conservatives. That was his purpose. He's also associated with Ollie Alexander. And Ollie Alexander, of course, is known as a blackmailer and a groomer in these circles. And Fuentes knew about that, which is why he's often been criticized by a lot of people, because he's part of a nasty group of people, in my opinion. I mean, I think they're trolls. So to answer your question, he's a Poe. I think he's a provocateur. There's no way he believes anything that he says. He advocates for things that, like Project 2025 or something, and he's not even a real valid representative of white supremacy. I think he's half Mexican, and there's a lot of things about him that are just inconsistent. To answer your question, Harks, the January 6ers were not locked up. That was all fakery. These were all feds. QAnon shaman, all of them. It was staged and fake. What Woo's News, WOOZNEWS, what Woo's News really explained in part 2 of his breakdown on January 6th is that during Trump's speech at the Ellipse, while they were still having their gathering there, the activity already started at the Capitol. The distance on foot is such that it would take 45 minutes to walk from the Ellipse to the Capitol. So 45 minutes after Trump's speech, the thing was well underway. The major parts were already performed. It was already at that point functionally a closed movie set. So everything we saw on January 6th was a closed movie set. And there was a number of people that Woo's News cited in his documentaries who were encountering people who were changing their clothes, who were obviously aloof from them and were eyeballing them as though they were outsiders. Like they had some kind, it was a closed set. It was a simulation. It was not provoked. In fact, I have a thing in Autohoaxology 101. I ask a question, or I make the statement, it is simulated, not stimulated. Simulated, not stimulated. It's not provoked. It wasn't because feds were telling people to do it and they just did it like automatons with no free will. No, the whole thing was simulated. Baked Alaska, a fed, was calling Ray Epps a fed. People were calling everyone else feds. It was all feds. That's the whole thing. The whole thing was a controlled opposition, theatrical production. Observing Reality says, I heard some extremely profound conspiracies on the Ground Zero show from callers during the show the day after the election. Worth a listen if you're interested. Yes, I am. I'm interested, and send me a link. Now, yeah, as far as the January 6th thing, no part of it was real. None of the cops died. These were all actors. And some of the things that are giveaways. Well, one, you have copious predictive programming. A lot of 1/6 stuff that became very clear after. But I think you can also add into it other elements. Things that are... Ashley Babbitt's death is probably one of the main ones. Are the barren books of fraud? Either they're a fraud, or the predictive programming for this Trump character goes back 100 plus years. Is that a stretch? Could they backdate something that's in the Library of Congress? Could it be fake? Either one. But we can find very concrete predictive programming examples of Donald Trump as far back as 1958 in that show Trackdown, the End of the World episode. And it had multiple aspects. Like when Trackdown was first noted as predicting this con man Trump who would build a wall, they were talking about this in 2016. They had remarked on these similarities. But it wasn't until 2024, or rather 2023, that the rest of the episode came true. Because in the latter part of the episode, he gets arrested. So they arrest Trump. So that wasn't noted when they first commented on Trackdown. So it's probably a good idea to go back and look at movies that contain predictive programming to see if there's anything else that you may have missed or that hasn't come true yet. Like a lot of people had noted that Stephen King, The Shining, well, Stanley Kubrick's The Shining, seemed to indicate Stanley Kubrick's involvement in Apollo 11. But it wouldn't have been intelligible until after 2001 that the movie has foreshadowing for 9/11. Ryler05 says, there's a video game called 9 Lives, 9 Doors, where they talk about several books being written before the Titanic happened that were close to what happened. Oh, there's a few. And there's a few things that suggest that the Titanic was a scripted event. I think you're right on with that one. In fact, you can look it up. A book that predicted. I think the Titanic is an interesting topic in itself. It's called Futility. Published in 1898, a fictional British ocean liner named Titan that sinks in the North Atlantic after striking an iceberg. 14 years before the Titanic. Then we had the Titan submersible going down to see the Titanic. Now, I think this is interesting because it's been used as a metaphor for the sinking of the West, but James Cameron's The Titanic foreshadows 9/11. On 9/11, James Cameron is at the Titanic, filming a documentary called Ghosts in the Abyss. But there are these fascinating relationships and connections to this meta script with this particular prop. So the Titanic is a very significant prop in this story, and it relates to the Twin Towers. It relates to the idea of too big to fail, hubris, the West, and sinking. The Titanic was brought up again recently in the form of a movie called Don't Look Up, starring Leonardo DiCaprio, who is the star of the Titanic. And in this movie, it's the Earth as Titanic, and the iceberg is a comet, which is pretty much a big space iceberg, coming down and hit the Earth. And they make this parallel on purpose, because the idea is that the West and its leadership, who are these people like Elon Musk, are going to put profit over people. They're going to mine the thing instead of deflecting it, and it's going to kill us all. In other words, we're going to overexploit nature to the detriment of all mankind. Climate change. And that Don't Look Up was referencing essentially we're kind of avoiding looking at what is heading our way. The iceberg that's going to sink the West and therefore the world. Climate change. So the movie's a climate change movie. You can also add to it, I think, specifically this Leonardo DiCaprio as the face of it, because he's the scientist warning everybody, and nobody sees it coming. He can't go outside without taking his pills because he's agoraphobic. And even in the trailer of the movie, they say, in 6 months and 14 days, the comet's going to hit the Earth. 6/14 is Trump's birthday. So we found some other interesting connections between Trump, the Titanic, the Twin Towers. It's all very integrated. We won't go too deep into the weeds there, but the Titanic itself is an interesting topic. And so Futility, written by Morgan Robertson, predicted it by 14 years. Titanic sinking was eerily predicted. They love that word, eerily. The train derailment in Palestine, Ohio was eerily predicted by white noise. How the mail streamer went down in mid-Atlantic by a survivor. Okay, there's a few stories. Very interesting. The Titan's very close. Ryler05 says, could they be copying the past in the present by shaping reality around a TV show? Kind of like how they made Elvis look like the side of Washington. Well, I think it's important to think about, like with this book you mentioned, Barron Trump, that this is not something that's new. Like the consolidation of media and the unification of worldview, the supplanting of all religions, this new world order, yeah, it's a new iteration of something very old. But when I look back at, look at Manly P. Hall's writings, The Secret Destiny of America, look at all the Masonic works and the New Agers talking about the great work of ages. It's all about this elite and their guidance of mankind through these changes of ages. It's almost like the world stage resets. And now we're transitioning into the science fiction age, where science fiction does, in fact, form the basis for a lot of our, I think, presumptions about we live in a science fiction construct. We live in a Disney universe, Planet Netflix, and the city of Gotham, for the most part, although there are multiple fictional universes overlapping. Well, Harks, yes, about carbon dioxide. And see, I think that the whole climate change narrative is a couple of things. I think it's one, it's Noah's myth, but told from the perspective of the state and the state as church. They've just appropriated all the Old Testament myths. And if you look at the symbol for the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, it's this like white bird going over the water, and Noah's symbol from the Bible is the dove. But it's the same story. Wickedness is now your carbon footprint. The idea of an angry flood god has been replaced by Gaia, which is a god construct. But they use science in order to Trojan horse what are actually myths, superstitions. Exactly what we were talking about, the noble lies. It's a noble lie. Mankind behaves better if he thinks that if he doesn't do this, these bad things will happen. Tom Smith says, do you think the controllers are people with huge egos or something else? As far as who they are, whoever runs the show at this particular minute obviously didn't invent it. Whoever it is, they have a worldview monopoly, and we're certainly divided into two classes, the programmers and the programmed. But the programmers are likely at least 95% programmed at the level of the individual. I don't see them all as collectively in the know, but rather selectively let in on certain aspects in order to maintain the integrity of the system. They wouldn't allow it to be. It's not open source. It's very closed. It's a closed system. It's hierarchical. There's something of a security clearance-like system. But at the very top, at the capstone level, where they would be aware of the whole worldview construct as a simulation, that's got to be a very small number. And I don't know exactly how one gets there. I don't know if it's family. I don't think you can get promoted working at CNN into it unless I think you have to have some kind of beginnings in intelligence. Interesting question, though. Now, yes, the programmers and the programmed, but there's a new class. That's the deprogrammed, and that's pretty much us. And the difference with us is that, unlike the programmers, we're not only being selectively let in on some compartment, some little area, so that we can lie in some particular section, but rather what we're doing is we're just letting everything out. Open source elimination, all of it. In fact, the deprogrammed would and should eventually have a better big picture understanding than most of the programmers, who are just teleprompter readers, script readers. But it's an interesting question. I think it'd be nice to do a diagram and kind of come up with a guess of our best estimate of who is in the know and at what level. Who's at the capstone level? Well, obviously Elon Musk. Anybody involved at the level of faking space has to be apprised at a very high level of how deep the fakery goes. Now, Donald Trump's ear wound being fake would necessitate a lot of people being in the know all around him. So you're looking at a PSYOP entertainment production crew. It's useful to look at this thing as a reality TV show. That we have an aspect to our news media where at times it can function as the myth maker. And it's run like a reality TV show. Characters playing roles on TV that the public thinks is real, and they act out a predetermined script. I mean, that's what psyops are. It's movie magic, magic tricks, and essentially reality TV soap opera. But I guess what we're bringing to the table here, as far as this conversation goes, is a perspective that recognizes that the worldview in which all these various narratives take place is, for all intents and purposes, a fictional universe and a closed system, one. And two, it's the simulation. It is the simulation that people live within. And it's not the real thing. Like, I'm not saying that the world's a simulation. The world's not fake. But the mental construct, our mental map, is infused with fakery. It's injected with hyperstitions. So you have a false worldview. And I would reference back to the movie The Village, where the villagers have a false worldview. They think their village is the world. And they're happy, and they know no different. They're ignorant. And if they knew, they probably wouldn't be happy and they would rebel. But the elders think it's best to lie to them to keep them from leaving. So that's a great example of how worldview works. So their model is wrong. And it's wrong because they haven't tested it. And what we're doing is we're describing the worldview the villagers still live in. Pete Tripper says, what if it is a closed simulation? Well, by closed system, I pretty much mean that it's a worldview monopoly. And if any person wants to introduce something onto the world stage that hasn't been acknowledged as real or valid, it's just not going to be given big attention. It's going to be marginalized and ignored. But it's closed to any kind of creative input from any outsiders. And it contains certain parameters, built-in assumptions. And these assumptions can't be challenged or changed for it to maintain its internal consistency. But as far as recognizing it as a simulation, it just means that you are no longer thinking that the map is the territory. You recognize that there are places where it doesn't quite line up. And you're called a conspiracy theorist where you point out where it doesn't line up perfectly. But recognizing that it's a selective model and it's not the territory is what I mean by being deprogrammed. Because if your built-in assumption is that everything that happens within it is real, yeah, you live in a simulation. I don't live in the world where planet-killing asteroids, nukes, and geoengineering climate change are a threat to my daily existence. I don't live in the world where space junk is real. Do you? I mean, really ask yourself, do you live in the world where a piece of hardware in low Earth orbit could fall and crush you in your sleep? Like, even if it's a 1 in a billion, is it even likely? Is it even like a 1 in a billion chance could it happen to you? Because I don't live in that universe. But if you are even a half-assed believer in the news, if you just tacitly accept whatever they say, you don't have an argument against space junk. You must therefore explain to me why you don't have a space junk helmet, because it is a threat in your universe. But I don't live in that universe. To me, that's a delusion. It's a hyperstition. But that's just one small example. And we could probably list hundreds, if not thousands, of things that do not exist that have been inserted into the worldview that people conflate for the real thing, the simulation. And you might just look at it as, like, outside the simulation, it's actually kind of boring. Like, their world's a little more interesting. Like, you notice that the blue pill world's pretty chill, blissful ignorance, but red pill and woke is agitated. Because when you go deeper into the programming, you get more superstitions. Now you're afraid of 5G towers. Now you're afraid of aliens, interdimensional aliens that could scratch you in your sleep. You have all kinds of things that make the world even less safe. Convenience stores are threatening. Everything is poison. You can't drink the water. It's terrifying. The elite are vampires. Hillary Clinton eats babies. So you go from just being a normal person with the accepted worldview into an alternate frame of reference where everything's a nightmare. Or you go to Woketown, where now everything's racist. where everybody's a racist, where everybody's an oppressor. So you have these really disempowering, frightening alternate realities that a lot of people opt into. But from such, living in the real world without this unnecessary augmentation, I mean, you can use it for information, but you don't. Dramatic. Like, I'm no longer worried about the world ending. And that's a fundamental difference between someone who believes we are in the end times, which, if you believe the science, you should. Just like the movie Don't Look Up. Listen to your scientists. If you listen to the scientists, you would know that we're going extinct in 6 years if we don't do something. Or if you listen to certain scientists, in 2029, we're all going to be hit by a planet killer called Apophis. 99942. Very ominous number. Planet killer. It's going to hit us in April of 2029, on a Friday the 13th, no less. So I don't have to worry about mass extinction events, for example. But I studied the model because I want to know where everybody lives. I want to know what worldview they have and how they view things. I like to know the terrain, this mental landscape. So I've identified it as normie land, and then within that box you have the subset of Trutherville. Trutherville is for people who don't think normie land is paying enough attention, and they lean right, they fear government, so they have an entire prepackaged worldview set aside for them, Trutherville. On the other side, for those who lean left and who believe in government and fear corporations, you have Woketown. And Woketown and Trutherville are mirrors of each other. One subscribes to critical race theory. The other subscribes to critical Jew theory. They each have their scapegoats. They each have their oppression narratives. They each have their eschatologies. And they're grotesque mirror images of each other. And neither of them are the truth. They're just exceptionally agitated on the fringes of the political horseshoe, which is an intrinsic part of the world stage. They've taken the political horseshoe theory and built it into a mental model. So if anybody decides to get active and wake up, depending on which way they lean, they're going to go on one side of the schism or the other. And they will find themselves in an alternate reality, both of which are subsets of the mainstream. Okay, let's continue here. My third eye says the news would be incredibly boring without the programmers, just traffic and weather reports. Yeah, absolutely. Or maybe not. It depends. Because it's not that news isn't happening. It's that what they show us is always very selective. Like, there is plenty of excitement. If they were to show us a lot of the gun violence in some of these cities, inner cities, you can find it all over Twitter. It's pretty much, it's horrifying. But they only focus on those events that have AR-15s and right-leaning shooters with manifestos who are a part of certain targeted websites like Discord. Okay, moving on here. Stuck in space. I'll find the article about the starving astronaut. I saw some pictures. They said that she was starving. Hopefully they do something. But yeah, they're still stranded in space. The storyline connects the Space Odyssey to the Odyssey, Calypso. And when Odysseus escapes Calypso, he confronts the Cyclops, blinds it, and is then attacked, or rather cursed, by the Cyclops, who invokes his father, Poseidon. So what happens after the astronauts leave, I don't know. It may tie in with this theme of the Odyssey. And I know that the Russians have some kind of a nuclear submarine, some kind of a weapon that they said could wipe out coastal cities, which I think is called the Poseidon. But we'll see. I mean, I'm looking forward, as much as any of you are, to the next plot twist. Okay, look at this. JFK requested all info on UFOs November 12th, 1963. So 10 days before Stanley Kubrick shot him. 10 days before, he requested the UFO information. So tomorrow, on that anniversary, there is a UFO disclosure hearing in Congress. So what Invisidon says, with all the events surrounding Trump, Tesla, Back to the Future, is it a coincidence? So something to look forward to. Those of you who enjoy nothing burgers, there's a big one tomorrow. So we'll talk about that and more. And again, just so you know, we are on TikTok and YouTube Shorts. If you call in and you want your call segmented and uploaded separate, just go to Twitch and then hit make a clip, and I auto export it. But I'll be in touch via newsletter with details on how to take part in that. So today we've been talking about assume nothing, assume nobody died, Nick Fuentes maces a grandma, calls for Biden to step down, will the prophecy of Gerald Ford come true? Musk's Starlink's falling to Earth. Is he covering up evidence of election rigging from space? And then the House Oversight Committee UFO hearings will be tomorrow. And hopefully they can do better than the hearings in Mexico, where they brought out the paper mache aliens. Do all of you know what those look like? Are you all familiar with the paper mache aliens? I mean, talk about like low effort psyop. I thought Trump's ear wound was low effort. Look at they actually brought these out. I've seen better props at Party City, and they put these things out like they were. It actually looks like a kind of a grotesque nativity scene. It's like a baby-sized alien, obviously made out of paper mache. If there's any audio issues, as some have experienced tonight, I'll be fixing those here soon. I'll go through my settings and see what I can do. Thanks again for all the comments. Appreciate it. We'll be continuing this conversation likely tomorrow. I'll be sending out archives here within the next hour. This is Chief Crow. Space is fake AF.
Because you can see the stars.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and
we were never able to see stars from the lunar surface or on the daylight side of the moon.
It's not black and white. I mean, it's black, but there's all kinds of polka dots.
Space is fake AF. Space is fake AF.
There's more than stars. You can see planets. You can see moons.
you see the gas.
Away from the sun, it's the darkest black you can imagine.
Hey, space boy, you broke my rocket man heart. Where are the stars? Is it bright or is it dark? The vacuum of space, oh, the tomfoolery.
What happens if you get a leak on that? You have a leak.
Debunk my bubble. Look, butterflies. Space is fake AF.
Research Eddie Bravo.